Greetings all, Dr. Raphael X here with a special guest, another video. Please click on the subscribe button, the like button, notifications button, all that good stuff. Leave a comment. Before anything else, let us begin with the sign of the cross. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. All right, so we have Maria Keffler here, who wrote a very interesting book and does tremendous things here. Her book by Sophia Press here, Desist, Detrans, and Detox, Getting Your Child Out of the Gender Cult. So thank you very much for coming on, Maria.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm glad to come and speak with you today.
Yeah, thanks for, I mean, this is really kind of been long in the making. I was trying to reach out to you and it's thank God, I think I reached out to you through LinkedIn or through your website. I forgot how it was, but I saw the ad for your book and I was thinking, I have to read this book. I have to get this author on to talk about it because it is really a hot button issue. And I think it's an issue that maybe a lot of people do not realize how important it is. So if you can talk a little bit about this book, what led you to write it and kind of what you do, just give background information for our audience.
Yeah, my organization, advocatesprotectingchildren.org, we are a nonprofit and we help anyone who's struggling to deal with gender ideology and deal with it from an honest, reality-based perspective. It's become this cult phenomenon out in the public sphere and the educational sphere. We have found so many kids getting sucked into this agenda. And the way I got introduced to how it's infiltrated the public school system, the entire school system, was a few years ago. A friend called me. She said I'd been looking around the school website for information about summer school, and she came across this transgender and nonconforming students policy meeting. And she said, "It's tonight. Will you come with me?" And so we went to this policy meeting and we were horrified at what we saw. I mean, I'm a teacher. I was licensed and trained as a public school teacher. I've been a proponent of the public schools up until I saw this happening. And I don't know, 10 or 12 people, teachers, school administrators, parents, sitting around a table talking about these policies. And the takeaway for me from the evening was that they wanted to hide things from parents. They consider parents a threat, that if children say they're non-binary or, I'm a boy, but I'm actually a girl, then if the parents don't agree with it and come along, well, they said we need to help parents along if parents aren't quite there yet. And I thought that was the most arrogant thing I'd ever heard, but it was horrifying to me as an educator. And my background is in educational psychology. That's what my master's is in. And so I'm seeing all these kids getting sucked into what is at its core a cult. And all the adults, the teachers, the principals, the pediatricians are all signing on to this, and there's no credible foundation for it. There's no data supporting it. There's no robust research supporting it. It is a cult, and it's damaging kids and families. And as we started trying to push back in the schools, we started getting parents reaching out to us. Hey, my child said he's trans. My child said she's trans. What do I do? And in trying to put together best practices, we're looking at what do we know from educational psychology? What do we know from common sense? What do we know from just good parenting? And we started putting together advice for parents. And the people we know who've gotten their kids back have followed the strategies that I put in that book. So that's really where it came from.
Right. Can you talk a little bit in because it's really interesting, and I think that's the overarching topic also, how in your book, how really this mentality, this T ideology, as we would call it, is really a religion and a cult, and you lay out the steps, kind of how it's paralleled with it, or what characteristics cults have, and you apply it to this is ideology slash religion. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, one of the things that cults do is they prey on vulnerable people. They're looking for people who are vulnerable for some reason. They're lonely, they're hurt, they're dealing with trauma, they're looking for some sort of an answer. And the cult comes along and says, "Oh, we've got all the answers. Come to us, we've got all the truth and all the answers." And we've seen again and again and again how kids who get sucked into this, some estimates are putting it at like 65, 70% of kids who get sucked into this cult are on the autism spectrum. And that could be a whole book on its own. But kids who are on the autism spectrum have a number of vulnerabilities. One of them is they're just socially awkward. They don't get along well with peers. They don't know how to do the things that make people like them. So you have a kid who's autistic and says, people just don't like me. I don't have any friends. Oh, that's because you're not actually a boy. You need to transition to being a girl and then you'll fit in better. Well, then the next step is love bombing. So you pull in these vulnerable people into the cult and just love bomb them. You're amazing. You're stunning. You're wonderful. We love you. We all, as human beings, need that. We just ache for that love and affirmation, and cults just pour it on because what they're doing is getting your loyalty away from the people who really love you, from your family, from your friends, from your community, and pulling your loyalty in so you're loyal to them. And they introduce specialized vocabulary and special esoteric knowledge. We have this knowledge. It's often religious, and I would say that this ideology is also religious. It's less obviously religious, but many cults do the religion thing where we have this truth. We know how the universe works. We know all of the secrets that those people out there in the culture don't know. And if you are with us, then you're in the in group, you're safe, you're protected, you're the good people. Everybody else outside, they're bad, they're toxic, they're evil. You need to cut them off. So those are just the first three steps, and they line up perfectly with what cults do. And we've seen it time and again how this ideology operates as a cult.
Right. It's really scary when I was reading your book. And again, get this book. It's easy to read, very profound, and very practical at the same time. But reading your book is very scary how, and cults do this, and so does the T ideology. They separate you from the people you're normally with, your family. It's like a us versus them mentality,
Yeah.
which really is the trans versus the cis. I think it's like kind of that binary you see almost. Yeah, it's scary. When I was reading that, it was really eye-opening. Can you talk a little bit about how do you approach this? Because probably some of my viewers may have directly this problem or know someone who has this issue in the family. How would you direct this if a child were to come and say, I'm doubting about my gender, or I think I'm trans.
Yeah, what often happens, it happens very quickly, and we see it happening via three vectors. The public schools, and unfortunately, sometimes private schools as well, social media, and smartphones. And so those are the three vectors. I would say just to have a healthy child, no social media, no smartphone. You're just giving your child an open door to all of the nefarious influences in the world. But by the time a child tells his or her parents this, the child has probably already been sucked into the cult. They've attended
Mhm.
the GSA club, the Gender Sexuality Allies Club at school. They've watched social media influencers, their content. Probably by the time mom and dad hear about it, it's already, I hate to say it, but really too late. They've already been sucked in. What you're dealing with then is a deprogramming. And as I said earlier, the cult tries to get the child's loyalty with the cult. Once the child says, "Hey, I'm non-binary, whatever," the child's identity has already been sucked into the cult. And so what parents need to do is follow basic cult deprogramming strategies. And the younger the child is, the easier this is to do. If your child is under 18, take them out of the school where they're getting introduced to this. I know that's a hard thing to hear, it's a hard thing to do, but you're talking about your child's life, health, future fertility. Get them out of that situation. You want to put a barrier around the child and keep the bad influences out. Where are they getting the tea juice? And cut all of those off. And at the same time, simultaneously surround your child with truthful influences. Are aunts and uncles in your family, your grandmas and grandpas, are they on board with you? Do they understand that sex is binary? People are male or female. There's nothing else and you can't change. If they agree with you, they're your allies. They're your people. Surround your child with those people. And you're trying to reestablish the relationship with the child and challenge the child with logic. So this thing is completely illogical. As I said earlier, there's no foundation for it. There's no basis. All of the supposed research it's based on self-selected surveys. It's based on researchers deciding ahead of time what they wanted to find and jimmying the data and the subjects around to make it say what they want it to say. There's no robust data for this. So asking those questions gently and with love that uncover the hypocrisy, that uncover the lies, and challenge the child to start thinking again. And I want to encourage parents, this is a long process. When parents start on this path, everyone's looking for what is the magic bullet? What's the silver bullet? What's the magic word? What can I do to make this stop now? And it takes time. Everyone I know who's gotten their child back from this, it's taken months or years to do. It's hard, but I also want to encourage you, it's not impossible. People are doing it. God was not surprised by this. This is just a new iteration of a very old heresy. And the very old heresy is that I am in charge and God is not. And we know that's not true. God saw this coming. I look at the Bible and I used to wonder, like, God, why did you keep saying this over and over again? Male and female, he made them. He made them male and female, all the male and female animals, all the male and female slaves. I remember reading that thinking, okay, God, we got it. Everybody knows male and female. But God knew even back at the time that the scriptures were being written, that at one point people would be so confused they wouldn't know that people only come in male and female. So rest assured that God is still in charge. He loves your child even more than you do. He loves your family. He is for you. And there is a way through this. There is a way back to safety. But also be aware that a lot of the people, the so-called experts in the world, are lying to you right now. My best friend's daughter went through this. And the mom and dad went to the pediatrician, and the pediatrician gave him a list of gender clinics. This is a pediatrician who had known this girl from birth. They went to the school. The principal and the school counselor said, you have to affirm or she'll commit suicide.
Right.
That's a lie. You're going to have to dig deeper and get to truth and find resources. That's why we exist at Advocates Protecting Children, is to provide resources that are honest to help families through this.
Right, that last point you mentioned, I think that's the most prominent, blatant lie by them that, oh, your child, this is going to be detrimental to your child, even to their life, if they do not conform to their gender
Mhm.
of their choice, which obviously is made up, which you mentioned at the beginning of your book. And also, it's like in this last video I did, we talked about destructive doctrines, and there's Gnosticism. There's a neo-Gnosticism going around, and that's really the basis of this gender ideology, where there's such a separation of soul and body, where the soul, your immaterial aspect can contradict your material aspect, where it's like, no, no, I feel, even though I see I'm a woman, or my soul says I'm a man. So there's
Mhm.
this dichotomy between these essential aspects of us, the immaterial and the material. So it's this neo-Gnosticism, which is like, I know what's true, and God has made a mistake, which is deep down a tremendous pride. And you alluded to Genesis and how God really emphasizes that point. No, no, male and female created excellent. I
Mhm.
like also, if you can expand on this point, because you did allude to this just now in your book, you mentioned this very well. But yeah, of course, the parents can give logical arguments to convince the child, like, listen, you have an irrational position. right? There is no you're a biological man. You can't be according to a different gender.
Mhm.
But you also talk about validating the feelings.
Mhm.
If you could expand on that, because I think that's really important, and I think especially maybe the male figures in the who tend to be more like let's just look at the logic and that's it.
Yeah.
Maybe less compassionate. How do you how do you do that? Like, how do you consider the feelings, but also at the same time, what you say validate the feelings, but not the reason or the logic. Can you expand a
Yeah.
little bit on that?
Yeah, yeah. There's a difference between the feelings and the reasoning. And our feelings, they just are. They're our emotions, they're how we react to things. They're never right or wrong. Now, we may interpret them wrong, or we may have a feeling because we've interpreted something badly. But it's always important as a parent in every situation to acknowledge your child's feelings. So a child comes home and says, the kids made fun of me today because my shoes are torn. It's very easy as a parent to take on just the logic and go, well, that's stupid. Shoes get old and they get torn, and nobody should make fun of you for that. That's not where you start. You start with, oh, that's so embarrassing, isn't it? That hurts when people make fun of you. I'm so sorry somebody made fun of you. Acknowledge the feelings there. Because what happens if you don't validate a child's feelings, the child learns that he or she can't be trusted to recognize when something is wrong. They're much more likely to grow up and tolerate abuse and tolerate harm because they've been told, oh, my feelings are wrong. So I just need to not pay attention to those. And feelings are red flags. They're either, hey, this was great and I want to get more of this, or whoa, this really hurt and I need to deal with it. So do validate their feelings. Oh, that I get it. You really are hurting. When the child comes home and says, yeah, I'm absolutely transgender. I was born a boy, but I'm actually a girl inside. You as a parent can say, that must be a really painful thing to experience. That must be a really hard thing to go through. Can you explain to me why you think that? So you've validated that he's hurting, and now you're starting to move toward explain to me where that came from. And you can gently start to push back by asking questions. How do you know what it feels like to be a woman? Like, I'm a woman. I only know how it feels to be Maria. I don't know how it feels to be my mom.
Mm.
Angelina Jolie and I are both women. I have no idea how it feels to be her. I'm sure she has a very different experience of womanhood than I have. How can you know what it feels like to be someone you're not? And just let that sit for a minute. And I want to warn parents, when you're dealing with someone who's been sucked into a cult, they get very angry when they can't answer a question. When they come up against their own illogical beliefs, they get very angry. That's okay. If they get angry and it's not a productive conversation anymore, you can just say, hey, you know what? Let's take a break. I don't think we're getting anywhere right now. I really want to talk about this some more. Let's come back to it when you and I are both in a better frame of mind. It's okay to do that because that child is going to go away and they're going to try to defeat your logic. They're going to try to figure out how to defeat your logic. In the end, they can't. And continuing that process of understanding the feelings, validating the feelings, and then questioning, that's really a good strategy for pulling them back out of those lies.
Yeah, it seems like you're saying, in a sense, you plant the seed of, this logical question that even though they're angry, they cannot respond now. They will ponder on it, and they want to almost in a vengeful way, maybe, which would have its fruit ultimately. They want to get back at you, thinking, logically, but that alone is a victory. It seems like you're saying you're getting them to think,
Yeah,
right? And I
that's
like
your
these
goal.
questions.
That's your
Yeah.
goal.
So I like these questions that you put here is on 32, 33. Very logical, very, the Socratic dialogue. Just
Mm.
ask questions away. Is gender fixed or fluid? If it's fixed, when is it fixed? Very, very logical. If it's fluid, can it go either way from transgender to cisgender and back again. So it's like, yeah, why would you transition? Because maybe you want to go back to your original, your original gender, which is your biological sex, obviously.
Yeah.
Like, why would you transition? So I thought that that was very logical. So again, get this book, very logical, key questions that you can ask, those who are thinking about transitioning in your family. You can ask them and bring them over to the logical sides because logic is essentially opens us up to reality. Now, do you
Mhm.
think, just going to one of your previous points, do you know, is social media always a factor, or is there other factors? Obviously, you mentioned that, like in public schools, there could be groups where they seek out vulnerable children, but is social media that much of a factor? Is it, I mean, if you take it away, is there a very strong correlation between social media and this transitioning?
I think so. When we talk to kids who've come out of this, and by kids, I mean even people who are in their 20s and 30s, who maybe they went through this through their teen years, their early 20s, and then they've come back. People who've come out of this almost to a person say they got involved in social media groups. Social media is completely unregulated, and I don't think a lot of people or parents appreciate that. I want to put a plug in for The Social Dilemma. It's a Netflix documentary. My husband and I watched it, and our eyes were open. We had our kids watch it. It talks about how social media operates. The FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, has rules for what you can put in movies, how you can advertise to kids in TV and magazines and newspapers. There are no laws governing social media. You have, no kidding, cosmetic surgeons advertising trans surgeries to kids on social media. You have influencers who are out there trying to get kids to follow them and come. And people ask, like, why? Why are people doing this? Why do they care? It's a billion more it is a multi-billion dollar industry. And so there's a lot of money behind this, both in the hormones and in the surgeries. And so you have a machine that is out there actively trying to recruit kids. And on social media, there are no strictures, there are no rules. And another problem, you have groups on social media, every platform, Facebook groups, uh, all the platforms have interest groups. Nobody's governing those interest groups except whoever's adminning them. I admin several groups on Facebook. I have a little knitting and crochet business and I admin those groups. I make all the rules. I can do anything I want in those groups. You get a group of kids who all join together. You have pro anorexia groups, pro bulimia groups, groups where kids get together and encourage each other to starve, encourage each other to binge and purge, to eat and then throw up. Um, Anything you can imagine has a social media group for it, and the gender ideology as well. So you've got a bunch of kids in these groups all encouraging each other in the same stuff, and there's no one challenging them. There's no one providing oversight. There's no one saying, hey, wait, that thing you said there isn't true. I know of a friend of mine, a child went to a school that was 6th through 12th grade, all integrated. And they had a GSA club, Gender Sexuality Allies Club. And that club met for an hour every week with no adult in the room because an adult in the room might make them uncomfortable.
Mm.
What you have there is high school seniors teaching 6th and 7th graders about sex and gender. And we've seen in schools that schools use what's known as peer-led sex ed. That's just peer pressure sex ed, where you have an older child come in and teach. We've seen it. They come into health classes, they come into gym classes, they've even come into English classes. Older kids coming in and teaching about sex and gender. And that's not legal for one thing, but they are doing it.
Wow, that's and then they banned these Bible clubs and it's I mean it's tremendous what's going on. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Definitely a cult. Now when you talk about detransitioning, because I read a good part of your book, but I have to admit I did not get to the last chapters because I was trying to read it in a week. So I did read a good part, but I didn't get to the last chapters. Well, detransitioning, you don't mean so much because I don't know if you mentioned it towards the end when you actually transition and detransition, or are you talking about when the mentality is kind of there, you're trying to convert the child, if you will, back to reality or detransition? Like, what do you mean exactly by detransitioning? Already where the transition's done and you're getting out of that, or you're kind of converting the child back into transitioning mentally, if you will.
Yeah.
To
Detransitioning refers to giving up the idea that you are the wrong sex, giving up the belief in gender ideology, and going back to living as your born sex. Now, if a person has had no medical or physical interventions, so like the first thing kids will do when they get sucked into this is a social transition. And what we mean by that is they'll change their hair, they'll change their clothes, they'll try to almost put on the costume that makes them look like the opposite sex. If that's all they've done, then detransitioning is simply stopping presenting yourself that way. I would like to say just that alone is hard to do because we talk to kids who have done it and they say it's humiliating. You've been so adamant and so forceful about, I am trans and you've got to call me this pronoun and you've got to treat me this way. They've been so militant. And then when they realize they've been lied to and it's all a lie, it's hugely embarrassing to come out in public and say, I've made a mistake. So although it seems like, well, if they haven't done any medical interventions, then it's not hard to detransition. It's still hard because of the social aspect of it. But then if they've taken cross-sex hormones, if they've had surgeries, then detransitioning is even harder. They've got to clear their bodies of the hormones. If they've had surgeries, that's probably final. We can't replace healthy lost breasts. We can't fix genitals that have been mutilated. Those are heartbreaking things. But that's what I mean by desist means stopping insisting. To insist that you're the wrong gender is what makes you, uh, we'll say T identified, but then to desist is to stop saying that. And then
right,
to detransition is to stop trying to convince other people that you're something that you're not.
right. Yeah, it's tremendous. Can you talk a little bit about the effects of gender ideology? You did mention it kind of sporadically, but if you can kind of hone in on those effects, which is very much based on scientific studies, and if you can kind of tell us a little bit of stories, because I know in the appendix, which I didn't get to, I'm seeing here the you have messages from desisters and detransitioners. If you can talk on that also, then that's an interesting opinion. I do want to read that. So I will continue reading this book, of course, after the interview, but if you could talk a little bit on that.
Yeah, well, we did a very small informal survey where we had 60 respondents, detransitioners, and sometimes their parents responding to questions. And that's where we pulled those comments from. And we asked things like, how long, were you insistent that you were a trans person? What was it that drew you in? What was it that helped you get out? And then we gave space for comments. And so a lot of those messages are from the comments. It's a hugely damaging ideology, both personally, for yourself, for your family, and for society at large. Gender ideology destroys everything it touches. It's actively destroying kids and families. It destroys you as a person because, I mean, if you do any of the medical interventions, they are not harmless. Kids who get on cross-sex hormones, a woman taking testosterone, a man taking estrogen, that's not what our bodies were designed for. A friend of mine likens it to putting diesel fuel in a gas engine or the other way around. It's not good for it. Me as a woman, my body is designed to run on estrogen. You as a man, your body's designed to run on testosterone. One of the really nefarious things that I didn't appreciate until a couple of years ago, once you are on cross-sex hormones for a while, and there aren't good longitudinal studies on this because this is a new phenomenon, so we don't really know. But anecdotally, what we see is after not very long, your body stops making its own estrogen or testosterone. So even after you detransition and you say, I want to go back to living as a man or living as a woman, your body might not go back to making its own hormones. So what do you have to do? Buy synthetic hormones from the pharmaceutical companies for the rest of your life because you can't survive without them. Your body runs on them. And so the drug companies have a lifelong customer. They don't care if you stay transitioned or not. You're buying hormones either way. Um, the physical damage from the surgeries is just horrific, but the damage to the family is horrific. Families who go through this, they say this is a nightmare. This is the worst thing they've ever gone through as a family. It breaks up families, it damages sibling relationships. One of the nefarious things about it in the family is everybody's forced to take sides. You either agree with the trans-identified person or you're a hateful transphobic bigot, and it will split families. Brothers and sisters stop talking to each other. Grandmas and grandpas get cut off from their grandkids, from their kids. It's just blowing up families. And then what it's doing to society, uh, more of the same, just more of the same.
Right, right. No, that's tremendous. And I mean, something you mentioned, which should be a deterring factor, is that you become a patient. You're a patient forever, whether
Mhm.
you transition medically and then you want to detransition. What you're saying, I mean, you can't produce the natural estrogen and testosterone that you originally had. You become a patient forever. And even if you stay in your detransition state, I mean, and you're medically detransitioned, you have to see the doctor constantly because you have all these artificial interventions that need to be fed, fomented, and continued. It's really mind-boggling. If if you can just talk a little bit too, and kind of wrapping up a little bit, kind of what patterns to look for. So kind of to anticipate and be more proactive, parents can look for these patterns and is that even possible, or are there is it kind of like different islands of themselves, if you will, how this works in individual cases?
It does seem to happen pretty quickly. So parents really need to be on top of it. I really can't stress enough, and I'm not trying to vilify teachers. There are some wonderful teachers in the public school system, but public school has been sucked into this. It's coming down on the federal level. It's coming down from the NEA, the National Educators Association, Education Association. If your child is in public school, this is there to some degree. And so I really advocate get the child out of the public school if you can. No smartphones, no social media. Those are the most protective things you can do. Keep an eye on what's happening with your child and the child's friends. One thing we see is more of an interest in the whole LGBTQ area. They're more interested in it. They're asking questions about it. Absolutely answer those questions. Don't hide from it. But when you see that happening, that might be an indicator your child's having some influences toward that. Keep the relationships strong in your family. None of us are perfect parents. We all make mistakes. We've all got sin behaviors and flaws. But if you can keep the relationship open, because one of the biggest lies these kids are being told is that their parents don't love them. Make sure that there's a lot of ammunition for that child to say, my parent absolutely does love me. We just went on a family skiing trip. My dad takes me out for burgers every Friday. Invest in the relationships with your children. I think too much as a society, we've gotten so busy. We are just busy 24/7 and we're exhausted. And what's suffering is our relationships and our families, among other things. So those would be protective influences. But I really think you're going to save yourself a lot of potential heartache by getting out of the public schools and no social media for under 18. And no kid needs a smartphone. Flip phones work just great. You can
That's right.
text, you can call. You don't need to give that child a conduit to the trans influencer living in his basement, making disgusting social media that's sucking in your child.
No, that's right. That's right. Yeah, invest in relationship. That's excellent. I actually there was this one point I wanted to talk about. If you could mention, I forgot to mention it before, but the motivation theory. If you can talk, because I think that's really important to if you could just elaborate a little bit on that, because that is a good tool to use to kind of influence the child positively.
Yeah, so when I was coming through college and learning psychology, everything was about behavioralism at the time, and motivation theory is at the heart of behavioralism. It's that everything we do because we're motivated to do it. It's all punishments or rewards that drives behavior. I want to say today, everything's about evolutionary theory. I'm teaching AP psychology in the high school right now, and the new textbook, everything's evolutionary theory. And so we behave the way we do because our ancestors, learned certain things. So I just want to preface it by saying that a lot of people are like, oh, behavioralism, that's old news. No, there's a lot of truth in it. And we keep going through cycles, and pretty soon evolutionary theory will be by the wayside. It'll be something else. But motivation theory says that we do what we do because we either get a reward for it or we get a punishment from it. And I tell a story in the book about my son when he was 13. He found out that there's a noise from a science fiction movie that terrifies me. And he loved to sneak up behind me and make that noise. Now, usually, if someone's doing something you don't like, if you just ignore it, they'll get bored because, again, they're not getting rewarded. They're not getting rewarded for it. So you just ignore it. But I needed it to go away quickly. I didn't want this to go on for a week or two. And so I said to him, my child, every time I hear you make that noise, I'm going to kiss you in public. And his eyes got huge. He's a 13-year-old boy, remember? So he was what, seventh, eighth grade. His eyes got real big. He said, oh, please don't do that. Oh, please, mom, I'll never do it again. Because mother's kisses are social death when you're a 13-year-old boy.
That's right.
And so I knew that was going to be a deterrent, and he never made that noise again. However, my husband was in the room when I said that, and his eyes lit up, and he said, does that go for me too? Every time I make that noise, you'll kiss me in public? For him, getting kissed in public was a reward. And so if I applied it to him, he would keep making that noise. But I said, no, that doesn't apply to you. That only applies to our son. So that's what motivation theory is about, is you figure out what is driving somebody, what reward are they getting out of this behavior? And if you don't like that behavior, how do you take that reward away in order to get the behavior to stop?
Right, right. Yeah, no, that's very, very useful, of course. There is a complaint how, modern psychology is very reductionist, but in a sense, because it was reductive, it has helped with these theories. So it has been beneficial, even though it hasn't seen man as a whole. So yeah, spot on. I agree. Well, excellent. This has been a really illuminative interview, and I just tell my viewers, get this book. I will leave the link to this book in the comment section. So get this book. Again, easy read, vital for our times. And even if you're not, a parent, you probably will be a parent in the future, God willing, but you know someone who having issues, this book can help a lot. So I would get this book, and even just having the knowledge, just in the theoretical, it will help knowing this stuff. And I'll give you the last word, Maria. And again, thanks for coming on.
Well, thank you so much. And I just want to leave with a hopeful note. I know I said this earlier. There's nothing new under the sun. God's not surprised by this. And if you're going through this, please come visit us at advocatesprotectingchildren.org. We have resources that can help. We can put you in touch with other organizations that can help. Don't believe it that this is a true thing, that your child is actually transgender, non-binary. We know that's not true. Our bodies are us, and there is a way forward, and you can get your child back.
Great, great. I'll leave the on the comment section. Also, I'll leave a link to the site. Well, thanks
Thank
again,
you.
Maria, for coming on. God bless you. And until next time.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.